Welcome to Mortified, the Friendship Quest, a podcast where two long-distance friends bounce media recommendations, all in hopes the other will like it. I'm Aaron.
And I'm an ominous and increasingly frequent ticking noise.
And this week, we cruise the balmy waters of AT5 with the 2022 indie horror game Iron Lung. Before we take a swan dive into an ocean of blood, remember you can help us on Mortified the Legitimacy Quest by subscribing to us on YouTube, iTunes, or Spotify, or following us on Tumblr at MortifiedPod. Leyla.
Aaron.
How do you feel about the bottom of the ocean?
I love the ocean. I love to look at her surface. I love to take a little swim in her. What happens below, like, human, normal physical swimming distance is none of my business.
You know, I think that is far and away the best policy to have with regards to the ocean. There's just some stuff that, you know, humankind was not meant to see, and that's okay.
Nope, I'm a big proponent of minding your business in most things, and especially with the ocean.
Yes. So, with regards to going to places that you're not meant to be, you probably heard about this video game, you know, recently, in, I want to say 2023, there was that incident last April with the billionaires that got trapped in their like own custom made sub and, you know, died because they went too deep. And that caused a spike in this game's sales, which the creator, David Szymanski, has, you know, publicly said like he feels pretty bad about benefiting from that particular event. But you know, I think it is an interesting, you know, thing that happened, and, you know, that probably put Iron Lung on a lot of people's radar. But yeah, you know, had you heard of this game before that, Leyla?
Yeah, but I can't remember where. Like, I've always just kind of had an awareness of it since it came out, but I can't remember the exact moment I heard of it, only that I remembered seeing the sales spike after the incident last year, which again is interesting because I watched that. I don't know what it was about that incident, but it was like fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. It absolutely like captivated my attention for the entire time it was happening. Like, I was learning how to read boat radars. That's
Wow.
That's the level of attention I was paying. But I can't say that inspired me to pick up a video game about submarines. Though, if you haven't, just as a side note, if you haven't read all the articles on the construction of that submarine, harrowing. And I was thinking about that while we were experiencing some of the phenomena in this here indie game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for a rare thing has happened with Iron Lung listeners, which is that me and Leyla actually played it at the same time.
Aaron played it. I backseat navigated.
Yeah, Leyla was the captain, and I was the first mate, and we were kind of navigating the Blood Ocean in this submarine together. But Iron Lung is like an hour long to play through the whole way through. So we were able to do it together, and I think that definitely impacted the experience. I think in some ways it was far less scary because I knew that you were with me. And in some ways it was just like really... we'll talk about your proclivities with gaming here in a second.
Okay, great. Well, we could talk about you sweating the entire time.
Listen, I did have to like change my pants because I was like, I'm gonna be so nervous this entire time that I need to wear shorts instead of jeans. It's also like 80 degrees in Central Illinois today, so
both of us really showed our we could have done that live for money.
Oh yeah, no. That would have been, yeah, if we had a larger audience, this is absolutely a thing we would have done, which is just like, hey, watch the podcast host get afraid. Because it was fun. But yeah, Leyla, do you want to like kind of talk through the story of Iron Lung?
Yeah, so if you, like us, can't figure out how to use the console that's on the submarine, you're the kind of raw, loreless experience of Iron Lung is that you are a convict. There is something happened called the Quiet Rapture, which is where all inhabited planets just vanished. Just went bye-bye. No trace, no nothing. And now there's just a couple of space stations remaining with occupants numbering in the hundreds. And you are a convict. You don't know what your crime is. Well, we don't know what your crime is, the player, I assume, the character. well aware of what they did. And you go into the submarine where is not designed for the amount of pressure that it will be experiencing. You are welded into it, and your front window is shut. So there's nothing around you but the box that you're in, and you are sent to explore anomalies on a moon called AT5. And one of the things that's so anomalous about it is that you are being sent into an ocean of blood. So you are in a submarine. Your only controls are to rotate your angle, to move forward in kind of like an X or Y axis. You have a map where you have to like figure it out coordinates wise where you're going, and you can reread your mission brief.
Yeah, it's very bare bones. It's very much just like, well, we're going to weld you inside this rust bucket, and whatever information you're able to send back, that's great. But, like they say that you'll get your freedom after you do these pictures, but it's like, no, you don't really weld people into submarines unless you kind of expect them to not be able to get out. But yeah, no, it's a very fun premise and setup, very much just like, oh, what's a horrible, horrible thing to happen to somebody? Let's do that. And, yeah, basically we go through and like there's 9 specified points on this like this grid map that we have to like travel through. And like occasionally there'll be bits where like it's not mapped super well. So all you have is that radar, which will like flash like there'll be 4 points on the radar that will flash to indicate you're getting too close to something, north, south, east, and west. And, yeah, it really is just like the barest bones of like navigating through this area, and it's a really great experience, frankly.
Yeah, and there's lots of cool. I don't recommend doing this before. Like, honestly, it's an hour long. If you like horror games, go play it. But then after you go play it, on the wiki, there's actually really interesting breakdowns of where all the like cues happen, various noises and events and such. They're really simple. Like, it all happens on a map. They're all location gated, but it's so effective. The first time we got the oxygen alarm, where it's like the oxygen level goes down just one more notch, the first like notch, we were like, oh fuck, great, cool.
Right.
Unsettling, and we don't like it.
No, and I think you made a good observation as we continued to play on, which is like the game is trying to make you panic by doing these cues. Like, there's basically no way. I don't think the game would work if like the game expected you to move quickly. But like it's still having those like little warnings, and like occasionally like you'll hit something or like something in the submarine will spring a leak, and then water will start like pouring into the submarine, and I guess blood technically. And it's like, okay, it's making you, it's sending you signals that things are getting worse rapidly. But at the same time, like, because it's a game that wants you to finish through its like narrative arc, it's not actually, wanting you to move quickly, but it's giving you those indicators that you should, which means that you're going to like make mistakes, which I think is a really fun premise for a horror game. Especially,
so there's one instance, you get close to the last point, and there is, immediately, so you have a radar, and it tells you when you're getting close to a wall. And Aaron and I very early in the game hit a wall, and that's how you die. But we only made that mistake once, and then we were good for the rest of the time. But immediately something pops up right next to you, and the radar starts beeping. And no matter how far away Aaron tried to navigate away from it, mind you, screaming the whole time, you couldn't get away from it. It was the creature following you. And literally the game, if you don't pay attention to where you are on the map, you will very easily, there's not a lot of like open areas. There's quite a few very narrow passageways you have to navigate. So the game desperately kind of wants you to panic and make a mistake. And it was the combination of like, we both freaked out. And then I was like, what if you just take a picture? What if you just stop and you take a picture of it?
Yeah, I don't think I was screaming. I was frantically whispering the whole time, like, "Oh my god!"
That's screaming.
I don't know what to do. That's true.
On the Aaron scale of like panic, that is as close to screaming as I think you get.
Yeah. We should, next time we hang out, we should watch a horror movie together, because I do scream. I get excited. But like, Yeah, no, I think it was really fun because like yeah, like I was just kind of like frantically pressing buttons trying to figure out how to get away from this thing, and you like very quickly identified like, oh, there's no, we can't get away from this. You might as well take a picture of it. And then like, this thing.
Oh, it's not that quick.
It was like a solid minute before we're like, we can't get away from this. It felt for like forever, but I don't think it was actually that long.
It was one of the longer. I think in terms of like points that stretched, that felt long. And then when we were approaching the anomaly,
right.
And the very last point where we had to take a photo. Those three were like, because the anomaly
was great. So like
so cool.
You have to like navigate through a very narrow area. So like your alarm indicators are going off the whole time. And as you get closer to this like point, you start seeing like this visual distortion on your control panel. So it like starts to shake and like warp in a weird way. And I was like, that's not normal. That's weird. And then like we took a picture of it, and it's like this weird starfish thing just down there. And it's like, okay. And then as we like moved away from it, it it stopped making that distortion. And then there's like a bump. And then I was like, oh shit, what happened? I don't think I hit anything. Our alarms didn't hit anything. And then I checked our coordinates and we had moved. And I was like, what? How did we move? Because like we had moved just enough that was like it wasn't clear whether or not we had like fully teleported. But when we went back and checked the wiki, there was absolutely a point that was like, hey, you'll get teleported if you go here. And like that's so cool to like make you like have that moment of questioning yourself at being like that can't be right. I thought maybe it was just like we hit a wall or something, but no, you actually do teleport, and that's the anomaly was great. I loved that.
And it's cool because you have such limited information that it's actually, like, you can only rely on your angle and your XY coordinates. And when those go awry, there's a moment of, like, hold on, but I knew where I was. But neither of us are that good at remembering numbers. Where,
right.
Like, we remembered, once we reached the coordinate, like, we recalled what the coordinate was. So we had to, like, triple check the map a couple times. It's like, oh, no, we did move directly east out of that ravine.
We moved through the wall, yeah.
So that was very, very cool. And then the last checkpoint you're approaching, you are up to your knees in blood. There were several leaks. We had experienced a fire, which is, I think, the most panicked I've ever seen.
That was hilarious because I was like, hey, is it just me or am I able to see better? It like the lighting is increasing in this. I turn around, there's a fire in the shitty little submarine. I'm like, oh fuck. Well,
and we both are just chilling. We're like, well, there's nothing we can do about it. And we go back to the console, but then the fire keeps creeping towards the player. And then thank God Aaron sees the fucking fire extinguisher, but then proceeds to do the most frantic, erratic mouse.
I was doing PASS, which is pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep, which is how they teach you to use a fire extinguisher, and it didn't do fuck all. You have to like hold and aim down to kill the little fire embers, but I was just like spraying all over the place, and I was like roasting alive.
It was hysterical. Was maybe the extinguisher in our hands was hysterical because I think it did come to our feet at one point.
Yeah, we started taking damage.
Oopsie doops.
It was great.
Yeah, so then you head towards the last checkpoint. You encounter the monster, and then the last photo op is so tense because you have to navigate through this narrow ass passageway. Leaks. You're up to your knees in blood. I'll paint you a word picture, because we didn't have our cameras on for this. I'll paint you a word picture of what I was doing. I was eating pho, delicious veggie pho, and I was sitting in front of a massive bowl of it. Chopsticks in the air, pile of noodle and vegetable, halfway to my mouth, unmoving. It was, I had just forgotten. And I think at one point I checked in with Aaron. I'm like, all right, how are we doing physically? He's like, well, now that you mention it, I'm not breathing right. Great. We're good.
Yeah.
And you get to this last point, and then do you want to talk about just like that last?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, all of the game, like you have to like very like carefully maneuver your submarine. Basically you have like 2 arrow keys, up, down, left, and right. And like when you press forward on the key, it'll go like slightly too much forward. So you have to like really shittily like click repeatedly to kind of get it to inch forward to the right coordinate. So like that's what I had been doing for all of these other points on the map. Until finally we get to the last point, and after we had like kind of navigated through a narrow pass, clicked around, was like kind of very clunkily angling my submarine towards the this point, and then like the last thing you have to do is like rotate your submarine to a specific angle to get the camera to face the point. So you do that, and the mechanism by which you take a picture is you position your submarine, and then you step away from the controls, turn around, and go to the back of the submarine where there is a single green button that you press, and then after a couple of seconds, like a shitty like 240 pixels, maybe closer to 180 pixel like black and white image will appear on a display panel to your left. So I was like, all right, we gotta do one more. And like, I knew that there was a jump scare about to happen at this point, because I was like, this is how it ends is a big monster comes and eats you. But as I am turning to go and take that picture, as soon as you turn around, that's when the monster comes and smashes through the submarine and cuts to black and kills you. And that was great. That was awesome.
Yeah, it got us both. It ruled to hell. And we went on YouTube afterwards to like check, we missed a couple of achievements, and we wanted to check like what somebody was like, well, what happens if you save the anomaly for last? Nothing. It's the same. You get eaten by the monster. But you die no matter what. I think the only other way you die is you can just like, if you go straight to the last checkpoint, the sub just collapses in on itself. And yeah, it is spooky and futile and just like a great 1 hour atmospheric experience. So shouts to David Simansky. It's a great little game.
Yeah, it was awesome. And despite the fact that there's not a lot of like plot to talk about, I do think there's a lot to talk about as far as like what this game is achieving with its design and atmosphere and tone. And it was great. But, before we get to those talking points, one thing that I like appreciated about when we were doing this together, was that like, I know you've described your method of playing games to me before, which is like, you are a completionist. And I was like, okay, yeah, Leyla's a completionist. They like to get every checkmark and achievement and, try to get as close to 100% as they can within the time frame before they burn out. And, you typically don't burn out as nearly as quickly as I do. Famously, I think you 100%ed Assassin's Creed Odyssey, something close like that, and that's like a 200-hour game.
I got close. I got 100 hours in that game.
Yeah. So like, Leyla, is a very intense person. If you know Leyla professionally, right, that makes sense, right? Very thorough. However, when we are trying to go through these checkpoints, they're spread across the map in like a certain number of ways, and like even in like trying to get like the first line of 3, Leyla's like, oh well, you should probably actually go to the furthest one and then work your way back. And I was like, okay, I guess. Sure, that makes sense. And Leyla's like, well, no, this is just obviously the optimal route, because you don't want to have to double back. That just makes sense. Like, yeah, I get, we're gonna die at the end of this. That, right? So
optimally headed towards disaster.
You should put that on your resume.
No, it was so funny because in retrospect, I realized that it didn't, it's not even like I sit there and ponder the best route. It just comes to me automatically. We were like deciding where to go next, and I was like, "Oh, absolutely! We're gonna go furthest east first. We're gonna double back and go straight north up to the next thing." And Aaron's like, "All right." Just the most insane human being. I think the thing that really made me realize that I am not normal is I was reading after I finished my first playthrough of Baldur's Gate 3, which is a massive game. I found a list of articles that was like, here's all the things in Acts 1, 2, and 3 of Baldur's Gate 3 that you missed. I didn't miss any of them.
Yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. No, that's like, my wife is currently playing Baldur's Gate and going through stuff, and then she'll still come upon stuff that like I had no idea what she's talking about, and yeah, like I think you just have a completely different approach to not just RPGs apparently, but all games. Is like, oh, you have to 100% them.
I am an insane person. I think the only game that I didn't do that with was Elden Ring, but that's because I'm a baby and I'm scared of conflict, and I'll like fight.
That's interesting because Elden Ring, notoriously a game in which combat is its primary verb.
Yeah, I know. I had to get good first. Now that I'm good, I can explore better. But my first playthrough, I was like just trying to get through.
Yeah, no, and you did, and you helped me, and we'll be looking forward to the DLC here in May. We probably won't do an episode on that because you work in the games industry, but we will probably have a good time together playing that.
Yeah, suffice to say, Aaron and I do a lot of Elden Ring co-op, and it's very funny because he has to tank. Because I am the most fragile glass cannon.
Yeah, no, I love that.
I think the last time we played, I got hit once, and we knew that the damage was about 500 HP per hit, and I went critical, and you were like, "Oh, you have 500 HP," and I was like, "Yeah,
excellent,
fine."
Good." Yeah. When I'm thinking about the verbs of a game like Elden Ring, right? Like, you know, combat, obviously the main one, but like Elden Ring also really worked for me because it emphasized exploration. And like when you contrast that with a game like Iron Lung, right, which is like doing a completely different thing, you know, I'd like to think about exploration in games generally because I think it is like a really fun thing to do. But like it's implemented in different ways, right? Like Elden Ring rewards exploration with like items, you know, weapons, upgrades to your you know, stones, right? So you can upgrade stuff. But like exploration here is rewarded with you know, like uncovering the mystery, I want to say. Like when you take pictures of parts of the Blood Ocean, right, you get like these shitty grainy pictures of like the stuff that's on the bottom, right? You see like these weird worms or you know, like creepy sea urchins, or eventually, you know, the skeleton of a fucked up whale, right?
Several rib cages, and at one point, just a straight up spine.
Yeah, just like a huge spinal column. That's great. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. Do you have thoughts on exploration as a game mechanic, Leyla?
So I love exploration. I'm on the same page. I love when you get rewarded for exploring. And that's not to say, like, I don't think that, like, ooh, every crate or every dead end should have a chest or something. But if you're thorough enough, you should get something out of poking your nose around, whether that's a story event or a cutscene, or even, like, if you're playing an RPG, maybe your companions are chatting and you get something cool. You come to a precipice and they say something funny. You know, like something should happen to encourage you to explore. And I come from the school of 2000s JRPGs where when I've talked about the Xenosaga franchise a lot, and I've made you kind of go through it with me a little bit. 2, when I say 2 was unplayable, you cannot get through that game without a guide. And there's this system of doors and key cards, and basically you'll go through an environment, you'll see like a big red door, and you can't open it until you get a key card, and you have to get the key card from a completely different area and then go back to that area and open that door, and there's something, usually a very good item in there. Usually you can get Cosmos's like scythe, you can get parts of a big fuck off robot that's made out of Legos that is super powerful for no reason, so lots of fun stuff. But without a guide, it is legitimately, it's one of those things where you're like, how was I supposed to know to look here? And it's like these obscure locations, or like, I always shit a little bit on Final Fantasy X2 when you go in, and the whole point of the game is to rescue Tidus, but unless you find the very specific spot where you're supposed to stand and whistle, then you won't get the good ending. Stuff like that, I think, is on the other side of punishing. I think Elden Ring is a great example because even though it does have a lot of like secret stuff to roll through, like walls that are fake walls or whatever, one, you can usually tell when a wall's fake because of the location that it's in. And you're like, wait, hold on, that looks like it should maybe go somewhere. You could try and roll, and either you embarrass yourself or you find something cool. But also, you get messages from your fellow players, and they tell you where to go. And right now I'm getting a lot of praises for a message that I left, because there's an area where you have to, like, there's one of the mage towers, and you have to go around to get to the top of it, you have to go around to the other side of the cliff and go on an invisible bridge and then an invisible ramp. And me and a bunch of other players left messages, and with the limited Elden Ring vocabulary for messages, you have to kind of tell everyone else, like, maybe throw rock so you can see where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really cool because that's difficult exploration, but there's ways around it. I think Iron Lung, similarly, the exploration is cool because not everybody is used to these like XY coordinates and it takes a lot of back and forth. But because all the events are location gated instead of on a timer, there's pressure on you, but the game doesn't punish you for being quote unquote bad at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, right. Like the game wants you to feel like, it's leading up to something, but like, yeah, you can, there was a very robust system of checkpoints. It seems like, we didn't die besides that first time. But afterwards, like, we got little save game notifications, right? So it seems like if you had, for whatever reason, crashed into something, you wouldn't have lost your progress. You would have like just reloaded close to the last major event, which is really nice. But yeah, it does seem like this game was really, more interested in getting people to absorb the story through just like experimenting and trying to move around, right? We watched a YouTube video where somebody was like photographing parts of the big sea creature that's like in the water, and like, at a certain point you will just like clip through it. Which, like, on one hand, does kind of break the immersion of the game when you can just, like, basically have your machine, like, moving back and forth through the monster that's supposedly there. But on another level, it does allow you to just see, like, oh, they want you to kind of, like, take pictures outside of the places that are marked on your map. They want you to kind of, like, fool around and be, like, trying to piece together the lore of the world and, like, what's happening underneath the ocean. And I think that kind of helps us transition into our other bit, which is like, there is lore to this, it's just like we never really, figured it out. But like, there's like a little computer in the machine, the submarine, where if you like type in certain phrases, it'll bring in like basically like a Wikipedia entry. And I think we both agree that like this is like a pretty interesting way to do world building in a scenario where you have maybe 90 minutes with the player.
Yeah, and I mean, like, again, not having the lore of the world doesn't hurt you because when you're in a situation that desperate, you are a convict, you're headed towards your execution. There's no way you're getting welded into a sub and it's going to end well for you. You kind of, like, does the context matter? You're going to die, right? Like, that's it. And then there's a note, like, written on paper in the sub that is, like, hey, if you're down here, this is an execution. Like, just so you know. You're going to run out of oxygen or something's going to happen, but at least I'm going to die down here and I'm going to die free. And when we did find the console entries, which we found on the wiki, I mean, it was interesting, right? There's a couple of factions. Mars was at one point the most populous planet. The factions got into it. And you are convicted because you blew up a space station. And now, even though the faction that has imprisoned you, even though they're like, oh, everything is decided collectively. Oh my God, we're like so about the collective like benefit of the group. And if you talk to somebody, like, please be polite. You should really consider your attitude and your vocabulary. And also, like, oh my God, this is all about togetherness and unity. Still, there was like a entry that alludes to the fact that the reason that these prisoners end up on the subs is because of mob justice, because there's pressure from the group to put these prisoners and to execute them via this like awful exploration. And you can find out about the scientist piloted sub that's like torn apart at the bottom of the ocean because of this creature. It's like cool stuff. It's really, it adds a lot of depth to your circumstances.
Yeah, like just hearing you say that reminded me that like, yeah, the lore entry suggests that the faction that, essentially imprisoned you, like, is supposed to, like, trying to be this egalitarian utopian society. And what's really funny about that is that they have the program that has you welded into the submarine to go into the blood ocean is called convict realization. And it's like phrased as a way to like re-educate, it's framed as a restorative justice technique, right? And even like realization makes me think of Maslow's hierarchy and like, self-actualization. It's like, okay, you're trying to make the people who did crimes, the best version of themselves. But of course that's horseshit because they're welding you into a submarine to go explore a blood ocean for no reason. Like, and that's a really fun way to like give the player a way to imagine the world without exactly spelling it out.
Yeah. And there are some larger franchises that I take umbrage with where, like, I think this is interesting because you don't need that lore to have a really great gameplay experience, but if you want like that extra layer of role playing, the lore is nice to have. While there are some role playing games that I've played where you miss critical plot information if you don't go to outside sources to do homework.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the complete inverse of this. And the example I always pull is Dragon Age Inquisition. If you go to Halam Shiral to do the Masquerade Ball quest, which is, bitches love masquerades. Let's just put that out there. You have a choice as to who you want to be in charge of imaginary France, and it could either be the Duke trying to do a coup, with the Empress's elven ex-girlfriend, or it could be the Empress, or the Empress and the elven ex-girlfriend, I think, are kind of your choices. You can get them to reconcile. What you don't know unless you've read a book is that the Empress did an elf genocide like a year ago. And so when you show up to the thing, you're like, oh my god, sounds like nice. And then if you know the context, you know that she did a little elf genocide. Why? Because her court was like, oh my god, she's definitely sleeping with an elf. And she's like, no, I'm not. Here, I'll kill the rest of them. And that's you don't have that information just from the games. You have to like have knowledge of a book. And so I think that is not a great way to world build, because the first time I played, I was like, yeah, sure, Selene could keep her fucking Empress seat. What do I care? And then now, subsequent times I've replayed, I was like, no, she has to die, actually.
Right.
Because I play an elf in that game. I do wonder how you can take this approach of like, what does the player at minimum need to know to feel involved in the story, and how can the mechanics drive that emotion? And then what lore is critical and what lore is what can be like supplementary? I think that's such like an interesting balance, and like learning how to scale that kind of information for bigger titles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about this from the perspective of tabletop games, where like a lot of conventional wisdom in tabletop games is to not like have like a big lore section, but instead like kind of filter lore out through various tables and like, you know, sidebars, putting stuff in that's like not essentially not like a wiki at the end or at the beginning. And like I think that's, tabletop games are such a different medium than video games, right? Because like ultimately the tabletop game is, one, what you read in the book, and then what you use in the book to play. The rules are ultimately kind of the skeleton from which you actually produce play. But they don't necessarily, dictate how your play goes. Like you can choose to ignore the rules, whereas in video games you must obey the rules unless you use a mod or something to explicitly break the game. But yeah, like I think that if you're gonna make a video game, right, you kind of have to have that lore be filtered in a way that is accessible to the player, but also doesn't, detract from the core experience. And like in Iron Lung, like the lore basically doesn't matter at all. Like at the end of the day, you're in a blood ocean, looking for a weird evil monster. Like you don't really give a shit about the coalition of iron or whatever. Like none of that really matters to you. But like it is interesting to be like, okay, you can do this side thing that does help you fill in the world and kind of paints a more fleshed out picture, even though like the core experience is horrible exploration.
Yeah, I like that you bring up that a lot of the lore can be done through like tables and stuff, because immediately my first thought is how Dragon Ball Z does like power levels, quote unquote, and how looking at the power levels of humans and the power levels of like say Goku,
right,
illustrates what kind of like demigods you're working against. I like that a lot. I think that's very fun. Somebody should make a Dragon Ball TTRPG. I'm sure it exists, but I think it'd be very fun. Because I think there's a Fast and Furious quality to Dragon Ball that I think could be very fun. But yeah, and then speaking of, we were talking a little bit earlier about the monster following the submarine. And like speaking of building scale, right, and telling the story. So because the monster can clip through the boat if you're not like interacting with it as part of an event, it is very funny. There is when you get chased and you take a picture of it and you see its eye very up close. We saw what that looks like in the game, which is that there's just a plaque of its eye set up against the ship's camera because you physically can't get at the angle you need to get that close to the monster without clipping through it. So in terms of like using the very limited tools you have to build out a world and build out an atmosphere and like build out the lore, I think it is very, very interesting that like, okay, you know, you're a convict, you're in the submarine, you're a shitty submarine, you have all these very limited tools, and it is so effective to then have this like little dot chasing you, and then you look outside and it's an up close picture of a fisheye.
Yeah.
And then that's the event. And when you break it down like that, it doesn't sound very scary, but like in the moment with everything else that you know, it's terrifying. Mm-hmm. And then once you kind of add the layer of like knowing the larger picture and the lore, knowing that that monster has destroyed a couple of submarines already and they're sending you down there because like they want to know more about the monster. It's so icky and good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no.
I love it.
I think this game is really, you know, making use of its limited scope in the best way possible. Like it kind of, the whole thing kind of meshes together in a way that feels clunky and terrible. Like, you know, we were talking when we saw the first, you know, opening screen, we were like, you know, this makes like PS2 graphics look good, right? Like it is using, you know, such limited assets, right? I think on the Steam page, the you know, like the recommended specifications are, quote, "you can run this," which is like really funny. But like at the same time, that limited scope really helps with the tone and atmosphere. Like the, you know, giving you so few verbs and controls, like making, you know, it feels terrible and bad in the way that this awful submarine should feel terrible and bad to drive. Because and it makes sense. It all kind of congeals, you know, from like an aesthetic standpoint, which I really, really appreciate. I think it's really smart. And like, yeah, I just, you know, going back to that, like, you know, talking about how the eye is just like a big PNG, right? When we went into the wiki, we kind of saw screenshots of like what the whole map looks like. You know, if you are able to move the camera outside of the submarine. And you know, it is bare bones. It is very stripped down. You know, like anytime you move the video game camera outside of the area that you expect the player to be able to see, it looks bad because video games are magic and miracles, you know, stapled together with blood and sweat and tears. But like, especially this one, it was just so nice to be able to see like, oh yeah, it makes total sense that like, you know, this is what the map would look like. And then like you get little weird snippets that are filtered through that camera. And I just really like that, you know, somebody took a short and small project and, you know, fleshed it out in that way. That made it, you know, it works so well. I think because of its limited scope.
Yeah, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think for folks who want to do game jams or want to make games, I think giving yourself a limited scope and choosing just like the most critical mechanics and then letting that dictate like, I don't know, how you build out your little piece of software and having the story centered just around like a couple of little mechanics and just using them as effectively as you can. That's a great exercise instead of getting lost in like all the possible features that like Unity or Unreal can provide. I love like limited scope games and limited scope problem solving. It's so inventive, it's so effective, and like just when the fire started and you see that light coming from behind you and you turn around, the fact that you have to like the moment where you have to break out of the verbs that you know, which is go, turn, photo, and thank God you clocked that fire extinguisher. Like just the effectiveness of like breaking the player out of a cycle that they know is so good.
Right.
And all it is pick up the fire extinguisher. So all of the decisions that you make when designing something like this, what you're doing is building the context, and then you have to let you're just doing some like light psychological torture on the player.
Mm-hmm. And that's good game design, is my understanding.
That's what I think.
So one thing we did do after we played this game was we noticed that there was a trailer from one Markiplier.
Have I ever told you signed my sandwich?
I feel like you've told me that story. Yeah, he signed a sandwich that you had because you didn't have anything else to give him to sign.
Which is funny because I didn't ask him to sign anything. I just ran into him in a hallway at PAX East. And, like, I just reflexively... I know I've told you this story before the audience. I saw him. I've never watched any of his videos. I just have, like, seen him around. And I was like, oh, Markiplier? Like, literally, like, reflexively, didn't mean to say it out loud, just kind of happened. And he goes, yeah, you want me to sign something? What was I going to say, no?
Yeah.
Was I going to look Markiplier in his big, beautiful eyes and say, no, I don't know who you are. I didn't mean to say that out loud. So he signed my empty sandwich container, and I did have it for several years. I no longer have it.
R.I.P. But yeah, you know, not to go too hard on Mr. Mark Fishbach, but you know, we did watch the trailer because apparently he bought the rights to turn this game into a movie. You know, and basically it was like a 1-minute trailer, right? It's him, you know, standing up out of a pool of, you know, blood, you know, reading the note from the previous convict of the Iron Lung, you know, and
which is already a choice because that's. Are you playing then the previous convict, or are you playing the convict that we played?
Yeah, like, you know, I don't know, right? Like, you know, so for one, maybe he'll turn this into a great movie, you know, based on the stuff that the, you know, Logan Paul made. I don't think it's gonna be a great movie, but like, you know, maybe it could be, right? But like, you know, I do feel like the trailer is maybe not giving off the right tone that makes. That like it's not really giving why that game is so special, and I'm wondering if you had any thoughts about that.
It's giving war never changes.
Yeah,
is what it's kind of giving.
Yeah,
and yeah. Okay, I won't even listen. This has nothing to do with Markiplier.
Right.
He's clearly very successful and a very smart, creative person, right? Like. What I'm about to say has nothing to do with Markiplier. It has everything to do with the choice to adapt this in the first place, which is, what are you adapting? Like, it is an hour-long game with very limited mechanics. There's one character, and it's you. The only other person you hear is the person giving you the briefing in the beginning, and they're like, yeah, by the way, we're going to lose contact with you. Good luck. You don't even get to hear good luck. There's no luck. They just send you down there, and the radio cuts out. And the whole horror of the experience is the solitude. You are down there by yourself. How is that compelling cinema?
You know, I think that's going to be really hard to do, right? Like, I think what makes Iron Lung compelling is that, you know, the POV is the person's controlling it, right? We are the protagonist because we are actually driving the thing. I think it'll be interesting. You know, I bet there has been, you know, you actually went to film school. You probably have a better, you know,
I
perspective.
flunked out of film school. Don't give me too much credit.
Listen, you've been to a film class before, which is infinitely more than I have. But like, you know, I'm sure there is some movie that's done like, you know, there's only one character in it, and like that's the whole thing. But I think it'll be I think it's a very difficult order to do, especially in the medium of film as opposed to video games. I'm not saying I won't go see it. I'll probably try to engage with that movie in some way because I liked this game so much. I'd be interested to see what Markiplier does with it. But yeah, I do feel like it is going a little bit closer to the edgy side of what this game is doing, as opposed to like engaging with the interesting, you know, concept of exploring a horrible blood ocean might be.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll probably also watch it just because I did also like this game very much. And I am curious about the adaptation, but is it going to be like Dwayne The Rock Johnson's Doom, where it has nothing to do with Doom? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Is it going to be 1993 Super Mario Brothers, which I know is a terrible Super Mario Brothers adaptation. I know it's a terrible adaptation. It's terrible, but it's a good movie. I like that movie. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, you can go listen to that episode to see Layla's terrible take on that, but sure.
I love that movie. And then I'll go to my deathbed defending it. Super Mario Brothers 1993 is good. Or is it going to be by way of like, what's a good one? We're watching the new Fallout show together right now with our good friend Marty. We love that shit. It's really good. It's a really loving adaptation of the source material. And like, you can tell that the people who made it got fallout.
Right.
So it could go any direction. The choices are going to be made. I don't know if I'll agree with all of them, but I hope there's something in it that I think is a clever. I get really antsy about any adaptation of anything that's first person. I'm really antsy about the Murderbot adaptation right now because how are you gonna it's all internal, so I don't really know how you're going to show that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, David Szymanski, Martha Wells, get your bag, you know?
Absolutely, 100%. Let artists sell out.
I think we should all get to sell out at least once. Yeah. I truly, listen, on the outside, I truly do recommend reading articles about the construction of that submarine. Just to give you all a preview, it was made out of carbon fiber, which cracks under pressure and is not reparable, that Boeing thought was too old to use on its airplanes.
Boeing.
Yeah.
Notorious airplane having their door fall off company.
Yeah, and wheels and putting shitty software. The electric was all done by interns. And it was piloted famously by like a modified Logitech controller, which the fault isn't with the Logitech controller, but with the multiple points of failure involved. It from the signal from the Logitech controller getting to the actual submarine. So I highly recommend. I think there's like an Atlantic article or something. Highly recommend reading about that because it is. That the only reason that submarine went out to sea is because it went out without the approval or the certification of like government agencies. Yeah. So crazy stuff. Don't go under the sea.
Yes, no, 100%.
It's none of your business.
So Leyla, while we may not actually fund a submarine, what I do propose for our Mortified marketing minute is what if we were making an indie game like this, like very low poly, so scraping assets together, from whatever PNGs we could find. This also assumes that either of us know how to code. Maybe this is when we'll get Marty in. Marty knows how to code. And we'll make this game together. But like, what do you think the Mortified indie horror game looks like? I have a couple options to maybe spark your ideas.
Tell me about this hot seat. Tell me about this hot seat thing.
Okay, so I had a dream last year that like I was like, this isn't nothing. This is something. But basically, the dream was like, okay, I was in like a classroom or like an office basically, and I was like, around. I was like, it was like being in school, right? But like they told me that I was in what they called the hot seat, which means that like anytime I talked to somebody, there would be like a bell that went off, and then like a light would show up on my desk. And that light signified to me that somebody was recording my conversations. And then if that happened too many times, my supervisor would come over and like say, "Hey, why are you talking?" And like, that's just the bare bones of the dream, but I feel like that is like a grain of an idea that could be blown up into something interesting, which is like, what if there was like some sort of surveillance thing that like indicated like, hey, by the way, now you're being recorded, and like you're being punished for trying to talk to people. So that's what my dream was once, and I feel like we could blow that up into like, oh, we are, you're a student at a school, right? And like you are, you're trying to take a test or something, but like anytime like your friend or like somebody who really needs to pass this test tries to talk to you, like an indicator will start to like flash. It's like, oh, hey, you have to be able to communicate, like, try to help them or like protect your own achievement in a way. Before like, somebody comes in and tells you that you're not actualizing your potential or something stupid like that.
I mean, what if you raise the stakes to life or death? Like if you don't help your friend, they die. If you don't score high enough. Yeah.
This might actually be the premise of that Logan Paul movie, which is like, if you don't do good enough on your government mandated test, you die. I'm going to look that up, but please continue.
There's a Logan Paul. You said it before, but I thought it was a dream. There's a Logan Paul.
Okay. It's called The Thinning. Quote, in a future overcrowded dystopian society, students with the lowest test scores are culled. 2 students discover errors with the test. And Logan Paul is one of the stars. This came out in 2016.
Should we do a Mortified episode on YouTuber movies?
Yeah, I think we should.
I think we should do it.
I think it'll be a dog shit movie, but like I do love that premise.
I think we should get into that because I'm sure there's another one somewhere that we can dig up.
There is. I guarantee there is.
Okay, great, cool. Well, we need to do some scheduling after we finish recording this anyway. So let's do that.
Absolutely.
So I think that's great. I think that's a great. I think it's a great premise. I like the idea of feeling trapped. Just if we're gonna make a game, I think in a classroom is great because you and I think have testified to being chronic overachievers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the idea of classrooms because again, reusable assets, great. It's a confined space where like you can every time you enter the classroom is like a new day, right? So that's how you kind of like gauge your time, Five Nights at Freddy's style. Mm-hmm. Like you respawn into the classroom. And that is your new day. Also, I like the idea of students disappearing if they score too low, because you can kind of, you can kind of set up some lore, like a conversation mechanic where you get to know your other students, and you start seeing them disappear, and you can set up some kind of meta narrative where like you think you know who's gonna get culled. And it could be like the asshole idiot kid, right? And you're like, God, I just want this asshole gone. And he gets culled first. But then one of the like superstar gets culled in the next round, right?
Right.
What's going on? Spicy little mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And then the test in and of itself, I have a pitch for you, needs to be stupid, right? It can't be knowledge based.
Right.
So what if it's like the cognitive test Donald Trump kept bragging about taking?
Okay. Do you have any like? Can you point me to like the questions for this test? I would love to see this.
Have
actually,
you never seen it?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's like identifying what a lion is.
Donald Trump cognitive test. I want to find this. Okay, The Guardian says I took a closer look at the cognitive test Trump claims to have aced. Let's see. It's not the hardest test. They have a picture and it says, "What's that?" And it's an elephant. The first three questions are indeed easy. First, you have to draw a line between numbers and their equivalent letters. 1 to A to 2. Then you have to draw a cube and a clock at 10 past 11. If you're lucky enough to not have any cognitive impairment, this part is also easy. There are 3 drawings: a lion, rhino, and a camel. Wow. Sure. What a weirdo. That dude's so weird.
He's so weird.
God.
He's so weird. Anyway, so I think it should be that.
Yeah, okay. No, I actually love that. Because I think that works really well with Iron Lung. Like, being like, okay, there's like a weird arcane thing I have to do to like negotiate these mechanics. And like, they don't, ultimately my decisions are not actually that important. But like, yeah, then it's just like, draw a camel or something. It's like, okay, what does this have to do with how good I am at school? That's a great mechanic. I love that. We should make this. Yeah. I'm cutting it from the episode. We are going to make hundreds of dollars on Steam.
Honestly, it might be a fun little game jam.
Yeah, no. If either of us knew how to code, we should do this.
You don't even need to if you use. Let's offline about it because I think we could actually make like a cute little. We could do it in like a visual novel engine, right? Like Rempe or Twine.
Oh yeah, no, Twine might be good. I could figure out Twine. Okay.
And Marty's a Twine expert.
And Marty does know Twine. Yeah.
Yeah, so we could do. Maybe there will be a little Mortified horror game by the end of the year.
That'll be fun. Yeah, maybe that'll be our October surprise. Okay. Well, Leyla, when we're not again doing game design gold every single fucking day, where else can we be found on the internet?
You can find me at LEYLSCS on Blue Sky. You can also find me inside the Silent Hill Ascension app on Monday, Wednesday, and or Friday. It's either me, my co-host Noah, or my co-host Eduardo doing the pre- and post shows at 5:40 p.m. Pacific. 20 minutes before Ascension itself airs. I am currently moving, so we should actually probably play a game at some point or another, or we can save it until after you move too and do like a little double. Which means that I'm very busy, but hopefully, I'm hoping, maybe, possibly this summer, my schedule evens out. And I am very looking forward to getting back to some of my creative pursuits. So, that's me!
Very good. You can find me on Twitter at AaronSXL, Blue Sky at a Voight, Monster Factory fanfic on Tumblr. But my main site is aavoight.com, where I talk about games and writing. I also have my YouTube channel where I talk about tabletop games. That's at aavoight on YouTube. My next video will be out by the time this episode goes up. It's on Ethan Yen and Kelly Tran's Fetch My Blade, which is a game where you play as a dog with a sword. So please check that out. Our theme song is Obsolete by Keshco from the album Filmmaker's Reference Kit Volume 2. You can find more of their music at keshco.bandcamp.com. Leyla, how should we close out this episode?
Well, Aaron, I'm glad we're closing it out because finally I will get my freedom.
Hell yeah. We'll see you all next time.